Welcome back to The Takeout. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said today, I'm paraphrasing a bit here, that America should hold his beer when it comes to complaints over a ban on U.S. liquor sales in most Canadian provinces. Canada will not budge, Carney said, because President Trump's tariffs started the trade scuffle between the United States and Canada. And Canadian provinces, he said, are in no mood.
Well, as soon as President Trump drops the tariffs on our steel, aluminum, on our dairy, on our lumber, and we'd be happy to drop them if President Trump dropped their tariffs.
U.S. President Donald Trump first slapped Canada with tariffs on Canadian forestry, steel, and autos. Many premiers slapped back by instructing provincially owned liquor stores to drop U.S. booze. Well, the White House this week says those booze bans are one of America's chief trade irritants with Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney today said Canada has its own complaints.
Look, you know what's an irritant? 50% tariff on steel, 50% tariff on aluminum, 25% tariff on automobiles, all the tariffs on forest products. Those are more than irritants. Those are violations of our trade deal.
A big decision from Doug Ford is shaking things up fast. He made it clear no U.S. alcohol in Canada until tariffs are gone. This is a strong win for Canada, but a growing problem for the United States. Sales could drop and tension could rise. The real question is, how long can the U.S. hold out? Ontario Premier Doug Ford delivered one of the most direct and consequential statements of the entire Canada-U.S. trade conflict on April 2026, and he did it with characteristic bluntness. Speaking at a Globe and Mail event in Toronto, Ford made the position clear and unambiguous. American alcohol will only go back on LCBO shelves when the United States removes its tariffs. He posted that same statement on X within hours of saying it publicly. No diplomatic softening, no timeline attached to a future negotiating process. A conditional statement with a single condition removed the tariffs and no flexibility around the sequencing. Premier Doug Ford said Wednesday he has no intention of putting U.S. liquor back on LCBO store shelves until there is a new trade deal in place between Canada and the United States. Once we get the deal done, which I'm confident eventually we'll get it done, then we'll bring back maybe California red wine. You can sit down and have a glass of wine, Ford said. The framing of California wine returning as a casual, celebratory moment after a deal is done carries more political weight than it might initially appear. Ford is not describing the alcohol ban as a painful economic sacrifice that Ontario is enduring on behalf of Canadian trade strategy. He's describing it as a straightforward lever. American alcohol goes back when American tariffs come off, and he is doing so with the confidence of a premier who understands precisely why he can hold this position without political cost. The ban is not unpopular in Ontario. It is the opposite. Ontario wine sales are up 67%. In the 3 months that followed the ban, Ontario and Canadian-made alcohol sales were up 19% at the LCBO. The market that American alcohol producers occupied before March 2025 has not sat empty. Canadian craft producers moved into it immediately at a pace that would normally have taken years. Ontario craft wineries reported significant sales growth. Local distilleries gained LCBO shelf space within weeks of the ban, a process that normally requires approximately a year of regulatory approval under standard circumstances. The economic case for maintaining the ban is not only about trade leverage. It is about a Canadian industry that has grown substantially while the American competition has been absent, and a consumer sentiment shift toward buying Canadian that has developed into a durable purchasing pattern. I'm sorry, folks. I don't trust President Trump, Ford said. He recalled that U.S. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick last year promised to lift U.S. steel tariffs if Ford removed a retaliatory electricity surcharge on 3 U.S. states, only to reverse course later. I get rid of the surcharge. And what do? They double up on us. So, I do not trust them whatsoever, Ford said. That specific historical episode is the factual foundation for Ford's current position. He suspended the electricity surcharge on New York, Michigan, and Minnesota in good faith, following a direct commitment from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick that removing the surcharge would result in tariff relief. The tariffs on Canadian steel were subsequently doubled to 50% rather than reduced. The lesson Ford drew from that interaction is embedded in every statement he has made about the alcohol ban since. Canada does not lift retaliatory measures in exchange for American promises. Canada lifts retaliatory measures in exchange for American actions. The distinction is not rhetorical. It is the specific reason the alcohol ban remains on the shelves and not in a pre-negotiation concession package. On the same day, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer told a U.S. House Ways and Means Committee hearing that the U.S. administration is kind of at the end of our rope and just asking for them to do this, referring to lifting the ban. Greer's statement is significant as an admission of where the pressure campaign actually stands. At the end of our rope is not the language of a negotiating party with leverage options remaining. It is the language of a party that has been asking repeatedly, has not received compliance, and does not have a mechanism to compel the outcome it wants without escalation that carries its own costs. The alcohol ban has survived an enforcement threat at a congressional hearing, a formal citation in the U.S. Trade Representative's annual market access report, and a listing as a CUSMA review condition. It has survived all of these because the political and economic conditions in Ontario make it sustainable in a way that the American pressure has so far failed to alter. The broader procurement dimension that Ford established when the ban was first implemented in March 2025 remains in the background of this story. Ford said US-based companies would be banned from bidding on Ontario's public contracts and said the civil service would go through existing contracts with a fine-tooth comb to see which may also be dumped. We won't award contracts to people who enable and encourage economic attacks on our province and our country, Ford said. That procurement ban, announced alongside the LCBO action and the cancellation of Ontario's $100 million Starlink contract with Elon Musk's SpaceX, established from the outset that Ontario's retaliation was multidimensional and not limited to the retail alcohol sector. We have to fight fire with fire, but we'll see how the Prime Minister makes out, Ford said, commenting on the federal government's decision to remove some retaliatory tariffs while maintaining others. Ford has consistently held a harder line than the federal government on retaliatory measures, advocating dollar-for-dollar matching of American tariffs, including the full 50% on steel, while working within the federal framework on broader CUSMA negotiations. His position on the alcohol ban has been consistent since the first day. It began as a response to tariffs, and it ends when tariffs end. If there is a deal, another USMCA, which I don't think is going to happen for a few months, or they get rid of their tariffs, and then we'll bring the booze back into the LCBO. And if they don't, then they aren't getting any booze on our shelves. The U.S. Trade Representative has listed lifting the alcohol bans as a condition for extending CUSMA for another 16 years. Ford has stated the alcohol bans will be lifted when tariffs are removed. Those two conditions are incompatible by design. Washington wants the ban lifted as an entry condition to negotiation. Ontario has tied removal to the conclusion of negotiation. July 1st is the CUSMA review deadline. The ban began in March 2025. Ontario wine sales are up 67%. American whiskey supplies in Toronto bars have run dry. And the premier of the most populous province in Canada posted on X that American alcohol only returns when American tariffs go.